I'm Jill with the West Regional Branch of the Mobile Public Library, and today I want to do a video about how to crochet. And I want to preface this by saying I'm a knitter, not a crocheter. Up until a month ago I had never crocheted anything, so I am very much a beginner, so take all of my advice with a grain of salt. But I did think, after I have just recently taught myself how to crochet, I would make a video with my advice, from one beginner to another. When I first wanted to learn to crochet, my goal was to knit a Dalek. And I started this first week of May. Well, actually, it's probably the second week of May that I actually started crocheting him, and just finished him, a few days ago. So, and I think he turned out fairly decent, especially for a first project. And the way I did this is my first goal when I wanted to crochet was to knit this. Well, to crochet this. I have been a Doctor Who fan since I was a little kid, and used to watch Doctor Who on APT on Saturday nights with my dad. And for 30 years I have wanted a stuffed Dalek and a Davros puppet. No luck on the Davros puppet yet, but I now have my stuffed Dalek. I've come across a pattern for a crochet Dalek. I'll put a link to that in the box below the video if you're interested. And my plan to learn to crochet was to look at the pattern, and at the beginning of the pattern they had a list of all the different crochet stitches you needed to know to be able to make the Dalek. I figured if I work through each of those stitches and learn how to do those, I could then kind of put that knowledge together and finish the Dalek pattern. So the first thing on the list was the single crochet, and honestly that learning that first one was a bit of a struggle, because the first thing you have to figure out when you're crocheting is how to hold your hook and how to thread your yarn through the other hand. And every single crocheter seems to do this a little bit differently. It's basically just trial and error until you find something that works for you, that you're comfortable with, and you can keep doing consistently. I know for me, even though I have experience knitting, and I'm not totally, things like tension and working with yarn's not totally foreign concept to me, but it still took me at least 4 hours over the course of a week to get to the point where I could just properly hold my yarn and my hook without getting everything all tangled or getting finger cramps or something because I'm not holding it right. But after I got the holding it properly done, and like I said, my recommendation is just keep at it, trial and error, you'll eventually find a method that works for you. After I found I got to where I could hold it right, I watched several videos to learn how to chain and single crochet. And I will put links to those videos in the box below this video, just so you can see which ones I watched. There's a lot of them out there, so keep watching them till you find one that clicks for you. And now that first single crochet, it took me about a week till I got to the point where I was happy with it. After I was holding the hook correctly, I was doing single crochets okay, but my tension was still all screwy until I practiced for a while. And if you just like with knitting, if your tension's not right, your work looks all bumpy and lumpy. The crochet, the first swatch I did, I had, some parts were wider and some parts were narrower, even though it was the same number of crochets, and I had little holes in it. But after about a week of practice, and again, this was probably another like 4 hours of practice, I got to the end of the swatch and everything was kind of neat and even. So then the third week, I took on half double and double crochet. Honestly, I picked them both up in like one afternoon, because the fact of crochet that, at least as far as I've seen so far, is everything you do is one motion. It's the same exact motion no matter what stitch you're doing. You're basically just pulling one loop of yarn through another loop of yarn, and the only difference between the different stitches is which loop are you pulling through and how many times do you pull through it. Once you get single crochet done, you won't have any problems picking up other stitches, or at least I didn't have any problem picking up another stitch. This might have been different back in the day when people had to remember how many times did I pull through this one to get to a half double. Now, you can always, we all have our phones and our tablets and our computers. Just, look it up on the internet and you go, oh, okay, all right, I remember that one. So really, I think crochet is probably easier to learn from scratch than knitting, because with knitting you do have about 4 different skills you got to learn. Crochet, there's only really one. Once you nail that, holding the hook right and holding the yarn right, and you pull it through, you've got the major like motor skill you need for crochet. Which doesn't mean it's easy. I did have some problems, which brings me to a couple pieces of advice. One, this is one of the things I struggled with, was seeing what stitch I was working with. And now this might be mostly a me thing because I have really bad eyesight, so you may be able to see it better than I can. But knowing where to put my hook through when I was pulling the yarn back through was a challenge, especially doing black parts, because it's harder to see black yarn than it is to see light yarn. The only way I was able to manage was using an LED light where I could shine the light directly on the stitches so I could see what I was doing. So if you have trouble seeing, check and see if you can get some sort of lighting, or move next to a window, or something like that. You might clear up your problems that way. Also, lighter yarn's probably better for a beginner than darker yarn, just so you can see what you're doing better. And then the second tip I had was, you really need stitch markers if you're doing anything round. With knitting, because of the needles, as long as you keep track of first needle, second needle, third needle, you don't necessarily need stitch markers. You can keep track of rounds fairly easily. With crochet, there is absolutely no marker at all if you're doing it around, so you're going to need to put a stitch marker in there. And I tried stitch markers that came with my crochet hook set, and I actually found that the best stitch marker was bobby pins. So you know, be prepared to mark your stitches if you're doing anything round or any patterns that, you know, would call for some sort of repeat, because it is, even if you're used to knitting, it's a lot easier to see where you are in knitting than it is with crochet. And that's pretty much it for getting started with crochet. I said nail that single crochet, and it's fairly smooth sailing after that. And leave me a comment below and tell me, one, do you like knit or crochet better? I still prefer knit, mostly because I can't see what I'm doing on crochet, but I am happy I learned it because I do love making stuffed things, and there's lots more patterns for crochet stuffed things. And then secondly, if you are an experienced crocheter, what is your best piece of advice for beginners? And that's it for today. Hope to see you again. Bye-bye.